Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hello, Patrick Donohoe here from the Irish Farmers Journal News Desk. I'm joined by Pat O'Toole to discuss the publication of farm payments which were made available this week. Pat, every farmer in Ireland with a single farm payment over €1,250, they had their details and farm details published this week on the Department of Agriculture's website. What has the reaction been from farmers, and what does it mean in an overall sense?
Reactions uniformly negative. Farmers don't like what they consider to be extremely private information published for all to see. They also feel that there's security risks surrounding it because people who may have desires to get hold of that money can access the information. And with the level of rural crime that already exists, we don't need any incentivisation for people to visit farmhouses in the dead of night. And that's what this is being regarded as. I suppose the reality is that it's public money. The cap is worth a lot of money to Ireland, 1.8 billion in total transfers every year. That money is fully justifiable, we would feel, in the Farmers Journal, and it's also extremely well analysed. We've just come through a very intensive review process of cap reform, which has lasted 3.5 years, and you could effectively say that's been a value for money report. Every week in the Farmers Journal we examine some aspect of direct payments. We look at how they impact per sector, per hectare, per county. And only last week, the National Farm Survey showed that in the dry stock sector, for instance, the single farm payment was 140% of farm income. So these figures, they can be distorting. They don't relate directly to the income that farmers get and that farm families get. And for that reason, without a proper context, the information really has no value.
So Pat, this isn't the first time that payment details have been made public, but it hasn't been done for a few years.
That's correct. Following the review of the cap in 2008, known as the health check, it was decided to introduce publication of payments so the consumer and taxpayer would know where their money was going. This went down very badly with farmers, and remember the Irish Times publishing an entire list of every single recipient who got over €100,000. But German farmers decided to take action. They brought a test case against the publication of payments. They were successful, and as a result, publication of payments was suspended in 2011 for all except limited companies who have been published since, but there's only a handful of those in this country.
There is the case being made that there is the need for transparency, that it dispels any myths about what farmers may or may not earn, and it does open that level of openness and transparency that is required in this day and age.
Well, in terms of what farmers earn, we have the CSO figures which come out every year. IFA does a well-regarded analysis of farm incomes, and the National Farm Survey looks at the 80,000 most commercial farms and looks at the farm incomes from them, and their figures were only published last week. So there's a huge volume of information on farm incomes which has not been challenged by anybody. In terms of the public good and the value for money people are getting back from the cap, we look at that this week in the paper, and for €2 a week the EU consumer is getting guaranteed food of very good quality, a guaranteed supply of that food, and the guarantee that the welfare standards and the environmental standards in the production of this food are of the highest standard globally.
Is there a point then, or the case being made, that all public sector workers should have their income thresholds published?
Most public sector workers are on a certain pay scale. Those pay scales are publicly available. Also, under freedom of information, for instance, the top earners in RTE are accessed on an annual basis now as public sector employees. So that information is publicly available. There is an equivalence, and that's exactly the minimum of what the farm organisations are looking for. IFA President Eddie Downey last week called for there be some form of register. So if anyone wants to access this information, which is now publicly available, that they have to make themselves known so that you can't anonymously drill into information.
The farm payments that were published are for the 2013-2014 year. We're after going through a major cap reform. Is this just a snapshot in time, and are we going to see a much different picture in a year, 2, 3 years' time?
Absolutely. The new cap had its first deadline last Friday. Every farmer filled out their single farm payment application, now known as the Basic Payment Scheme, for 2015. But that information won't go online until May 2017. So really what we're looking at now is of historical interest. Every country has a different system of transfers, and the Cholas reforms affect every country differently. So I understand that you've been talking to someone in France about the situation over there.
Yeah, the president of France's main farm organisation, Xavier Boulon, was in Dublin last week, and to him and representing over 200,000 farmers in France, they don't see the publication as any real issue, as it's been commonplace for up on 10 years now. So Boulogne confirmed that while there was some resentment and opposition at the start, that it's now just it's just part of the course now. It's everyday life. Okay, thanks Pat. And of course this issue is covered broadly in the Irish Farmers Journal this week and on www.farmersjournal.ie.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
With the silage season underway in many places but only getting started in others, Thomas Hubert visited a contractor in Cavan to see how the season is progressing.
My name is Wesley Strong. We're a mile from Mount Nugent in County Cavan.
We can hear the milking parlour going now, and there's also a lot of machinery around us. There's a silage harvester, there's a mower in the yard, but I think it's not going out much these days. How is that end of the business going, the silage cutting?
Well, I'm afraid we have only really one job done at this stage, and it's now the 2nd of June, and we're despairing of this weather.
So how do you normally work on silage?
Well, normally we would get going around the 20th of May. Usually at this time I wouldn't have time to talk to you, but this year it's very, very wet.
How many people do you normally cut silage for around here?
Well, we would cut in the region of 1,000 acres annually, and approximately 20 or maybe 25 farmers from here extending down to Ballina in County Cavan and up to maybe near Delvin side in County Westmeath. Since I left school I've been cutting silage and enjoy doing it. Not always financially rewarding, but it's something I like to do.
Is it the machinery or the contact with other farmers? What do you like about it?
Well, both, I suppose. Certainly working machines, I like doing that.
What kind of machinery do you have? Could you just run us through the various bits of equipment you use for the silage cutting business?
Well, I have a John Deere self-propelled harvester. It's an O2 machine. I have Cavernaland mower and New Holland 135 working it. And we have a few Ford New Holland 40 series for drawing in. And we push up on the pit with a JCB loader.
Do you have a baler as well?
No, I've only a square baler. Don't do round bales anymore. I used to.
Why is that?
Expensive to buy wrap. At that time I used to have to supply wrap to farmers, and it was very expensive, and if you didn't get paid leaving the field, then you're running up a big bill on wrap alone.
So when you're talking about the financial rewards or lack thereof, is it much related to the weather and to the conditions on other farms as well?
Well, it takes a lot of money to get machines in good condition to go out every season, and my machines are getting older, and I haven't renewed anything recently, so it takes a lot of money to keep them going. And certainly I'd love to be in a position to buy a new tractor, but too much involved in financing that.
And even without talking about new machinery, but just maintenance, I can see there's new tyres on the tractor outside, and everything is in very good nick, shiny and clean, so it's a lot of work even just to keep it going.
Oh, it is indeed, yes. You have to, take the harvester, you have to strip it down and see what it needs for pre-season, and usually involves a good deal of work and a lot of spare parts. This pulley here, that had to be replaced this year, and it's a very expensive part, €2,730. Generally, when you start into here, into bearings, into the, there's quite a lot of work and quite a lot of expense in maintaining those. Some years you might have to spend more than others, but this year it cost me in the region of 7.5 or so to service it and replace anything that it needed.
Yes. So what do you hear from farmers? Because we know the quotas are gone, everybody wants to do more milk, and at the same time silage isn't coming in. Are people beginning to get worried?
Well, I'm sure there are a lot of people despairing at this stage, yes. Grass needs to be dry going into the pits if possible, but it doesn't look as if it's going to happen in the immediate future anyway.
So what are your options now? Are you more likely to just wait and delay even more, or are you coming to a point where you have to cut wet grass? You have no choice.
Well, we're going to test grass in the morning. It's just for sugars to see, give us an idea whether it would ensile. We're given 2 days this week, and sure, we might have to make use of them and go and cut.
What do you think of what you see, the weather compared to a normal year?
Well, it's been extremely cold of late, and one shower after another this last couple of days, and the wind. I'm very, very annoyed at it, but sure, what can we do?
Now, fortunately enough, you're not only relying on silage cutting. You have your cows that we've just seen now going into the milking parlour. Can you tell us a bit more about this? What kind of a dairy farm do you have?
Well, I milk around 85 cows, and we supply Glanbia. I have part of it as a liquid quota, and I have to supply milk every day of the year. So that keeps me busy.
It would indeed. And just when I called you before coming over, you said you haven't had your own silage cut yet. So that's a worry for your own farm, not only for your farmers you're contracting for.
That's right. We'd normally try to have it cut first so that we can get to cut other people's, but that hasn't happened, and we'll have to wait and see.
Okay, good luck with that, Wesley. Thank you very much, and all the best for the weather and the rest of the summer now.
Thank you.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Another weather story now. Andy Doyle is in the field to see how crops are progressing and discusses a spray supplement in this week's Farmers Journal.
Yeah, I've been around the country a good bit over the past few days, mainly on the northern side of the country, but I know that in the south things are largely similar. I think there's two major observations I would make. One is that the disease protection programs used in the winter crops appear to be holding very well. So crops are still quite clean, at least relative to where the starting point was. And we're glad of that, because there was a fear that the awkward weather of the past month and difficulties applying particularly the T2 fungicides on wheat might have given rise to problems. The second thing that's becoming increasingly noticeable is the spring crops are showing that they are under more pressure as time goes by. You're seeing more yellowing, you're seeing crops that are not nearly as full as they should be. We're seeing tracking in fields, all things that are indicative of just basically a lack of growth, a lack of the vigour that's needed to fill them up and cover over the cracks, so as to speak. Some people would be tempted to suggest that nitrogen has been washed away. It's not one of the immediate conclusions I would draw. I think that when you look at where soil temperatures are at the moment, I think soils are cold, much colder than they would be in the early part of June. They're just not giving up the nutrients that are necessary to drive growth, and frequently the temperature above ground is just not able to drive growth fast enough either. So they are the kind of main conclusions I would draw currently.
So that's the reality we have to work with, and going forward there will be plans to be made for the months and the year to come. You have edited a sprays supplement coming out this week with the Farmers Journal. Any advice for the longer term in this supplement?
Yes, indeed, Thomas. But the medium term and longer term, I think one of the things that we try to do in this early June supplement is to give people advice on where crops are gone, where they've come from over the past couple of months, what the disease pressures are, and then ask some of the specialists to give the best advice as to how they can either tackle the problems that are there or hopefully just complete the crop that has no problems at all. So we carry that advice in it. So that's something that people have to do for now or in the next few weeks. I also give some advice in there as to the fact that we have a lot more potential in the varieties that we're planting, and that people need to look to improve their soils long term in order to help get best use out of the sprays that we're using, and to give all of those sprays a good helping hand with good husbandry that does certain things to reduce the pressure or to kill weeds in another way, whatever the case might be.
So spraying is not the only answer. Any example of tips you're giving there, other types of husbandry to accompany spraying?
Well, I think that most farmers will be aware, Thomas, that if you start planting very early in the autumn, and we know people have to plant in the autumn because if you have big acreages to cover, you don't want to be planting at the end of October or November, because there's too big of a risk that you will get either total or partial crop failure with extra difficulties in there. So people are tending to plant earlier for good reasons, but if you're planting earlier, then you must be choosing varieties that are resistant to disease, because if not, putting in a susceptible variety early just means that the disease gets a bigger chance to get a foothold for the following spring, and that's more costly production for the rest of the year.
Now, crops aren't the only thing growing here in Ireland. Any advice for grass and grassland farmers?
Yeah, we always carry a feature on grassland weed control and the importance of it for people that have mainly grassland, and in particular docks become a big single problem that people have. And more recently, along with dandelions, and some people have big problems with buttercups. But just to carry basic advice as to what things that people can do, and advice also as to when they might act. But we also carry advice this time round, because from November next we will have a change of rules that influence who can apply herbicides in the future. Up to now there's been no constraint on that, but from here on in, unless a person who is applying a pesticide, which could be a herbicide or a fungicide or an insecticide, unless they are registered as a professional user with the Department of Agriculture, they will be in breach of modern rules, and penalties will apply accordingly. And everybody who purchases chemical, you don't have to be a professional user to purchase chemical, but once chemical is purchased, it can only be applied by a professional user, and the department will be looking for all of the links along that chain in the years ahead during cross-compliance inspections.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Congratulations are in order for Irish Country Magazine, who at the Bloom Festival last week won a gold medal for their show garden. Let's hear from Ciara Leahy and Klara Heron.
Hi, this is Ciara Leahy from Irish Country Living, and I'm here with Klara Heron from Irish Country Magazine, just after finishing up a fantastic weekend at Bloom with nearly 100,000 people that visited the Phoenix Park over the weekend. And I suppose a great accomplishment for Irish Country Magazine this weekend was the fact that we won gold at Bloom. So Klara, you were there for the whole weekend. How does that feel?
Yes, well, we were obviously shocked to win the gold. We couldn't believe it on Thursday morning when we got the news. It was just amazing. When we started planning this, way back when, about over a month ago now, we just never in our wildest dreams expected to get the gold medal. So when we found out that we had the gold medal for the medium-sized garden, it was just absolutely brilliant. And then the buzz lasted for the entire weekend. We were getting great feedback, so it just felt great.
Brilliant. So tell me about the garden. What was the main concept behind it? How did you get a gold medal, basically?
Well, we worked very closely with Fiona O'Neill and Lisa Kelly, our designers from Inspiring Gardens. They were absolutely brilliant. So we had plenty of meetings with them developing our concept. So really there was three kind of main things to it. We wanted the garden to be very practical. We wanted people to be able to take ideas away from it, whether they had a balcony in the city or they had an acre of a back garden to work with. So we really wanted to inspire people to take home those ideas and be able to do anything no matter how much space they had. We also wanted the garden to be very sustainable. So there was a lot of upcycling in the garden. All the materials used were found in salvage yards around the country and, upcycled into something new. So it was affordable and also sustainable in the sense that we had our grow your own section, which was our raised beds with lots of perennial vegetables, interesting exotic vegetables, and we also had our bee garden, which was a lovely walkway beside the path, which is all about feeding the native bees, keeping them happy, so lots of colourful pollen rich plants. And then we also had our beautiful layered forest section, which is all about foraging, and there was lots of medicinal and herbal plants in there that you could use to treat yourself and remedy. So that was great. And then the kind of third thing, I suppose, was just that inspirational element. So showing people new colours, new ideas, ways to do things that were interesting and new.
Excellent. So there's a lot covered there. What was the main things that really caught the visitors' attention?
I would say our upcycled features were massively popular. So our raised beds got a huge amount of feedback because of their good height. So they were about hip level, and so you're not bending over, breaking your back trying to cater to your lovely vegetables. And they were also made from upcycled materials. So it was recycled corrugated iron, which was spray painted to make them look brand new. And then we also had recycled scaffolding timber, painted with lovely farrow and ball colours. So people were really impressed by those. Like, they were a real showstopper. And then we also had features like our 3-door shed, which was basically 3 doors bolted together with a hinge on one side. People loved that. It was just so simple and practical. Another lovely feature, which is something that you could take away even if you only had a wall to work with, was our alpine strawberries, which were potted and hung on the wall in recycled scaffolding plank and just painted with some lovely bright colours. So they were really, really simple, got a lot of great feedback.
And I suppose it probably got a lot of good feedback because they sound like very practical things that people could do in their own garden. It's not some fancy landscaping, you know, it sounds really, really practical.
Absolutely. I mean, to walk around Bloom, like, all of the gardens were so impressive and magnificent, but you could see the gardens that maybe would, you know, they'd cost you a lot of money if you really wanted to recreate it. Whereas with our garden, people were literally taking notes on what they could do as when they went home, maybe this weekend or next weekend. So it was literally, you know, get those materials. Once you get them, go to salvage yards, or, you know, look in your other friends' back garden, see what they've got there, and a lick of paint and a couple of nails, and, you know, you could create something really beautiful.
And really economical.
Absolutely.
So what happens to the garden now?
Well, we are very happy to be donating the entire garden to the Cope Foundation in Cork.
Fantastic.
So, yeah, Cope is a brilliant foundation. They support adults and kids that have intellectual disabilities and or autism. So they would work with them through learning and housing. They do really engaging, fun social activities. So the garden, you know, our garden was very much also about the community and being a communal garden. So, you know, that is just a perfect fit for us. And then also we had the features such as the raised beds, which are perfectly accessible for wheelchairs and people with disabilities. And also our entire garden was underlined with stabilised iron, so that mechanical wheelchairs could very easily access it, even despite there being gravel. So, I mean, the garden itself actually was built with all of that in mind. Great. So it just makes it a perfect fit. So we hope everyone in Cope gets to enjoy it as much as we did.
Well, the garden lives on, and for Irish Country Magazine, it was a great weekend in Bloom. Thanks very much, Klara.
Thank you.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.